The year was 921, a time when England was not yet a united kingdom, but a fragile web of territories, some Saxon, some Danish, some still contested. Into this world was born Edmund, the son of the mighty Edward the Elder, and half-brother to the legendary Athelstan, the first king to truly call himself King of the English. As a boy, Edmund grew up in the shadow of his elder half-brother, Athelstan, whose reign, 924 to 939, shaped much of the Anglo-Saxon identity. Young Edmund learned not only the arts of war, swordsmanship, horsemanship, and shield tactics, but also the weight of kingship. He saw how kings had to be both warriors and diplomats, how battles were won, not only on the field, but at the negotiation table, and how loyalty was often as fragile as parchment. Athelstan had no sons, and so young Edmund would become his heir, whether he was ready for the burden or not. When Athelstan died in 939, his crown passed to Edmund. He was only 18 years old, barely a man, when he inherited not only the throne, but also a kingdom in crisis. For while Athelstan had achieved the dream of uniting much of England under one rule, unity in the 10th century was like sand. It slipped quickly through the fingers. The Danes of the Danelaw were restless. Old enemies from the north and across the Irish Sea smelled weakness. The very year Edmund ascended the throne, Olaf Guthfrithson, the Norse king of Dublin, invaded Northumbria and seized York, tearing it from English hands. The kingdom could have fractured then and there, but Edmund was no passive youth. He was cut from the same iron as his forefathers, kings like Alfred the Great and Edward the Elder, and he understood that to be king of the English meant constant battle against those who wished to destroy the fragile realm. Edmund's first years on the throne were soaked in war. In 940, he marched north to retake territory from the Norse. Battles raged in Mercia and the Danelaw, but Olaf was a formidable foe. The war dragged on, and Edmund had to face the grim reality that not all fights could be won with the sword alone. By 941, Olaf died suddenly, and his cousin Olaf Kieran, known as Olaf Sitrickson, took the throne in Dublin and York. Edmund, ever the calculating leader, seized the opportunity. In 942, he retook the 5 boroughs Leicester, Lincoln, Derby, Nottingham, and Stamford key Danish strongholds in the Midlands. This victory was more than symbolic. It showed the English that the young king could strike hard and reclaim land long lost to the Norse. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle praised this campaign, noting how Edmund brought these crucial cities under English rule. It was a moment of triumph that solidified his authority. But Edmund was not only a warrior, he was also a diplomat. After years of exhausting war, in 944, he drove the Norse kings from York, effectively reclaiming Northumbria for the English. Instead of endless bloodshed, he brokered peace treaties, showing wisdom beyond his years. One of his most remarkable political acts came in 945, when he conquered Strathclyde in what is now southern Scotland. Instead of ruling it directly, he handed it over to King Malcolm, the first of Scotland, on the condition that Malcolm became his ally. This was a masterstroke of realpolitik. Edmund secured peace on his northern border while strengthening ties with Scotland. This policy of forging alliances through both war and diplomacy became a cornerstone of the English monarchy for centuries to come. Like his grandfather Alfred and his half-brother Athelstan, Edmund recognized that kingship was not only about swords and shields, but also about laws and justice. His nickname, the Magnificent, was not merely for his victories in battle, but also for his efforts to build a more stable and orderly kingdom. He issued laws to protect the church, strengthen royal authority, and curb blood feuds among noble families. He recognized the importance of the church as a stabilizing force, supporting monastic reform movements and strengthening ties with the clergy. These acts gave his reign a sense of legitimacy and divine favor, vital in an age when kings claimed their right to rule by the grace of God. Just as Edmund's reign was beginning to show promise, fate dealt a cruel hand. On May 26, 946, at the age of only 25, Edmund was attending a feast at Puckle Church in Gloucestershire. The hall was filled with laughter, feasting, and drink. But in a moment that would change history, a convicted outlaw named Lefa entered the hall. Accounts differ on exactly what happened, but the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle tells us that Edmund spotted the outlaw and, furious that such a man dared enter his home, attempted to eject him. In the struggle, Lefa stabbed the young king. Edmund bled out before his men could save him. The outlaw was cut down immediately, but the damage was done. A great king won who had defended England with both sword and diplomacy, who had reclaimed lost lands and forged peace with Scotland, was gone before he had even reached his prime. Edmund was buried at Glastonbury Abbey, a place that would become central to England's spiritual life. His death left behind two young sons, Eadwig and Edgar, who would one day take the throne themselves. Though his reign was brief, only 6 years, his impact was immense. He stabilized a kingdom in peril, reclaimed critical lands, and set the stage for the continued unification of England. His brother, Edred, succeeded him and carried on the work, but Edmund's achievements in both war and diplomacy were the foundation on which later kings would build. In time, his son Edgar the Peaceful reigned 959 to 975, would bring about one of the most stable and prosperous periods of Anglo-Saxon England. That golden age owed much to the blood, sweat, and sacrifice of Edmund the Magnificent. History often remembers the long-reigning monarchs, those who sat on the throne for decades. But sometimes it is the short-lived reigns that burn the brightest. Edmund I was king for only 6 years, yet in that brief time he fought like a lion, governed like a statesman, and died like a warrior defending his honor. His story is one of youthful vigor, of a king who was thrust into power too soon, yet bore its weight with courage. His enemies feared him, his allies respected him, and his people mourned him deeply. That is why more than 1,000 years later, he is still remembered not simply as Edmund, but as Edmund the Magnificent.